On December 1st, 2018, 21-year-old Grace Amy Rose Millane, who was traveling around the world, disappeared without a trace after arriving in New Zealand. During the search for her, the only lead law enforcement had was several hours of footage from internal and external surveillance cameras around the city, which were expected to provide answers to all their questions. Amy Rose Millane was born on December 2, 1996 in Wessex, England. She had two older brothers, Michael and Declan, and was the youngest of three children born to her parents. Grace was a very sociable and cheerful person who loved her family deeply. She was also creative and loved painting. Grace studied advertising and marketing at the University of Lincoln. She successfully graduated and before moving on to the next stage of her life decided to use her savings to travel around the world for a year as she loved adventures very much. Everyone described Grace as a very kind and caring young woman. Before leaving for her trip, she cut her long hair and donated it to the Little Princess Trust to help make wigs for children suffering from cancer. In October 2018, Grace left her family and set off on her journey. The adventure-loving graduate joined other travelers along the way and spent 6 weeks in Peru. During her travels, Grace often shared her experiences and impressions with her family and friends through social media. On November 19th, Grace traveled alone from Peru to New Zealand and arrived in Auckland 11 days later. She checked into a hostel located on Queen Street, where she shared a room with several other travelers. On Saturday evening, December 1st, Grace left the hostel and headed to the city center, where she was supposed to meet a man she had met on the social network Tinder. At first, Grace was hesitant to meet someone she had met on social media, but after several weeks of messaging, they finally agreed to meet in the city center for a drink and a chat. After the meeting, Grace was impressed by the stranger. Grace sent a message to her friend Amina, telling her that she liked the new acquaintance and felt comfortable with him. She also said that her new acquaintance was a well-established and mature person who worked as an oil production manager and was living in a hotel. On the next day, December 2nd, it was Grace's birthday. She turned 22. Her family and friends sent her numerous messages and congratulations through social media, but Grace did not respond to anyone. When her family tried to contact her by phone, they found that it was turned off. Grace's brother Declan became very worried. If until then, the young woman had been sharing countless details and photos of her trip every minute with her friends on social media, her sudden disappearance on her birthday was very strange and suspicious. Grace was very attentive to her family, and when she did not contact them for 3 days, her frightened parents officially reported Grace missing to the Oakland police on December 5th. The police contacted the hostel where Grace had been staying, and the hostel administration informed them that Grace had not been seen there since the evening of December 1st. At first, the police did not suspect any foul play because most of Grace's belongings were still at the hostel, and they thought she might have stayed with a new friend. Thanks to the numerous surveillance cameras throughout the city, law enforcement did not need much time to determine where Grace was on the day she disappeared. Law enforcement began reviewing footage not only from street cameras but also from cameras inside the hostel and offices located in the area. After reviewing numerous video recordings, the police found footage of Grace's movements and followed her route, which started from the hostel and led to the Sky City area, a very popular and busy place in Auckland, known for its many hotels, bars, and restaurants. The cameras showed that at 5:45 p.m., Grace took a photo of a Christmas tree and sent it to her family. Then footage showed her meeting a young man. To find out who this unknown man was, timely identification was necessary. At the same time, experts began examining Grace's social media accounts, trying to determine who was the last person she had contacted. As the investigation progressed, every detail gradually came together like a puzzle. The police discovered that the last person to message Grace was 26-year-old Jesse Kempson. Originally from New Zealand, he publicly commented to Grace, "You are so beautiful and attractive." In the photos, the young man looked very similar to the one who was captured on surveillance. The man Grace last met was 26-year-old Jesse Kempson. He was born in Wellington and moved several times during his childhood after his parents separated. Raised by his grandparents, he had no contact with other family members. Acquaintances described Jesse Kempson as a pathological liar. It turned out that he lied about everything, from claiming he was the cousin of a famous player from the All Blacks rugby team to saying he had cancer and was going to die soon. He lied to everyone, including employers, partners, family, and friends. Jesse was often caught in his lies, which frequently led to eviction from rented apartments and loss of jobs due to his constant dishonesty. The owner of the house where Jesse previously lived claimed that the young man had been deceptive, asserting he was a professional softball player signed with the New Zealand Black Sox, the national softball team. He assured the landlord that he was waiting for money from a contract and would soon pay the rent. However, after 8 weeks without payment, the landlord contacted the Black Sox management and found out that Jesse had been lying. He also misled the City Life Hotel, claiming he was an executive manager at Woolworths. In reality, he was paying for his stay at the hotel using government assistance. Jesse's last job was in telemarketing, which also ended in dismissal due to his dishonesty. The police realized that he was the person from whom they could obtain important information about Grace, so Jesse was summoned to the police station for questioning. When Jesse arrived at the police station, the officers asked him to describe the evening he last saw Grace. He told the police that he met Grace on the social network Tinder, and on Saturday evening they met at Sky City. Afterward, they went to a bar called Indies, where they had dinner and drank alcoholic beverages. They agreed to meet again the next day before parting ways. According to Jesse, Grace walked down one side of Victoria Street while he crossed to the other side because he had a meeting with someone else at a different bar. After that, Jesse claimed he never saw Grace again. The police needed to obtain street camera footage to verify whether the evidence matched Jesse's account. Kempson also repeatedly told the police that he couldn't remember many details from that evening because he had drunk a lot and was intoxicated. While Jesse Kempson was being questioned about Grace Millane's disappearance, police discovered even more crucial security camera footage that revealed the true story. Jesse Kempson alleged that after saying goodbye to Grace, he went to another bar and drank alone, and the next day he woke up hungover in the hotel. He stated that when he woke up, it was exactly 10 o'clock. The police asked why he was so certain about the time, and Jesse replied that he looked at his phone and remembered it. But something about his statement didn't add up. On Sunday morning, December 2, 2018, Jesse was caught on surveillance camera leaving his hotel at 8:01 a.m., then entering a store and purchasing a large suitcase. Before returning to the hotel at 8:14 a.m., the police showed him a printed photo taken from the surveillance footage and asked him to explain why the time he claimed was different from the time shown on the footage. However, Kempson insisted that what he said was true. Caught in a lie, Kempson became angry and requested a lawyer. After speaking with his lawyer, he refused to answer any further questions. 5 days had passed since Grace's mysterious disappearance. Despite knowing that Kempson was lying and hiding something about Grace's disappearance, the police released him on bail. It was necessary to review many hours of surveillance footage. The police hoped to find important evidence in the recordings that would finally reveal what happened to Grace. Grace's movements around central Auckland were captured by numerous cameras. The more footage the police reviewed, the quicker Jesse Kempson's story began to unravel. Jesse Kempson stated that after leaving Sky City, they said goodbye to each other, with Grace walking down one side of Victoria Street and him walking down the other, claiming they never saw each other again. However, surveillance footage revealed that they did not say goodbye and crossed Victoria Street together. It was established that the couple did not part ways after Sky City. Instead, they went together to a Mexican cafe and later moved to a bar located behind the City Life Hotel. The cameras showed that they were quite close and seemed to be enjoying their time together. However, there was one disturbing moment in the footage when Grace went to the restroom and Kempson rummaged through her handbag. After leaving the bar, they went to the City Life Hotel where Jesse Kempson was staying. Surveillance footage from the hotel elevator showed them entering the elevator together and later leaving it. This was the last recording in which Grace was seen. It was determined that in the morning, along with a travel bag, Kempson purchased cleaning supplies. He then took the bag containing unknown items to a dry cleaner. The law enforcement officials were left with only one question: where was Grace? There was no footage showing her leaving the hotel. The police decided to search Kempson's hotel room. During the search, they found no trace of Grace, nor any of her belongings that would confirm her presence there. At first glance, nothing in the room appeared suspicious. The law enforcement officers decided to use luminol, a substance that can detect traces of cleaned blood. When the forensic team sprayed luminol around the room, numerous blood stains appeared on the carpet. The investigation now had enough evidence to arrest Kempson. During the interrogation, Jesse Kempson gave a version that was radically different from his initial statement. He confirmed that they went to the hotel room together that night where they had sex. Jesse said that Grace talked to him about her sexual fantasies and the movie 50 Shades of Grey. He then asked if he could blindfold her. Kempson insisted to the police that it wasn't his idea but Grace's, and that he was simply doing what she had asked. Kempson said that Gracie asked him to hold her hands tightly around his throat during sex. He tried to convince the police officer that something unexpected had happened during such rough sex. Kempson tried his best to blame Grace, but Kempson's story became less believable, especially after he told how he discovered Grace was dead. Kempson claimed that after sex, he went to take a shower, but fell asleep while showering. When he woke up and returned to the room, he discovered that Grace was dead. Because of this, he panicked, placed her body in a suitcase, and took it away to bury it. Despite telling his version of events, Kempson continued to deny murdering Grace. Experts explained that it is impossible to strangle someone without the process taking a significant amount of time, making it unlikely to be accidental. As a result, the theory that Grace died from rough sex was ruled out. Based on the available evidence, experts concluded that this was a case of murder, not an accident. Kempson stubbornly tried to prove that it was Grace who had asked him to do it. During questioning, Kempson was asked why he didn't call emergency services. He replied that he had dialed the number, but then realized that the dead girl was in his room, which made him afraid of the consequences. As a result, he didn't press the call button. Analysis of Kempson's phone revealed even more shocking details. It was discovered that after Grace's murder, he searched pornographic websites online and then began looking up how to dispose of a body. One of the options the suspect considered was burning the body. He also searched online for information about whether birds of prey exist in New Zealand, bizarre methods he explored in an attempt to cover up the crime. Police discovered a photo on Kempson's phone that showed Grace's naked body after her death. They also found that using the same social media media platform through which he had met Grace, he had arranged a date with another woman shortly after the murder. Police discovered a photo on Kempson's phone that showed Grace's naked body after her death. They also found that using the same social media platform through which he had met Grace, he had arranged a date with another woman shortly after the murder. The police questioned a girl who met Jesse after Grace's murder. She said that during the date, Jesse brought up uncomfortable topics for her, such as burying corpses and law enforcement. Because of this, she felt uneasy and refused Jesse's offer to drive her home, choosing instead to go home on her own. When the law enforcement fully analyzed the extracted surveillance footage, the police were finally able to see the complete picture of the committed murder. The footage showed how Kempson bought cleaning supplies and a new decoy suitcase. Then, on December 2nd at 10:25 a.m., Kempson called a taxi to pick up the rental car and return to his apartment where the girl's body was. Later, at 3:57 p.m., he went on a date with another woman at a bar near the hotel. At 9:00 p.m., Kempson rented a steam cleaner and returned to the apartment. At 9:30 p.m., Kempson was recorded on the elevator leaving the hotel with suitcases. According to the police, Grace's body was placed inside that very suitcase, which Kempson then put in the trunk of the rented car. The next morning, on December 3rd at 6:50 a.m., Kempson entered a Technic store located 25 kilometers northwest of Auckland, bought a shovel, and headed off the road into the woods to bury Grace's body, which was inside the suitcase. About 2.5 hours after burying Grace's body, Kempson returned to the hotel and carried a black garbage bag into the elevator. He then walked about 1 kilometer from the City Life Hotel and threw the items he had taken from the room into a trash container. It was likely Grace's clothes, phone, and other items that the police couldn't find. He then took the rental car to a car wash, washed it inside and out, and threw away the shovel. Considering what Jesse Kempson told the authorities, the police didn't take long to find Grace's body. They discovered it in the mountains near the Waiukari Reservoir, about 25 kilometers from Auckland. The autopsy confirmed that Grace died from asphyxiation. The bruises on her hands and chest indicated that she was being held down, which would have required significant force. The strangulation lasted for about 4 to 5 minutes. After the crime scene was fully reconstructed, Jesse Kempson was officially charged with the murder of Grace Millane. 6 days after Grace's funeral, Jesse appeared in court but pleaded not guilty. During the 3 weeks of his trial, Jesse mostly sat with a blank expression, showing no emotions. From time to time, he would look through documents and hold his head in his hands. The defense argued that Grace's death was caused by a consensual, rough sexual act, that Grace had engaged in similar sexual encounters before meeting Jesse, and that her death was merely the result of a tragic sexual accident. The defense attorney for the accused tried to convince the court that after the tragedy, Jesse panicked, and that was the reason he decided to hide Grace's body. The prosecution, however, took a different stance. They argued that Jesse was not panicked at all, and that everything had been premeditated. According to the prosecution, Jesse calmly set about covering his tracks and weaving a labyrinth of lies. Ultimately, after a 5-hour final hearing on December 22nd, 2019, Jesse Kempson was found guilty of the murder of Grace Millane. He was sentenced to life imprisonment with the right to apply for parole granted only after serving 17 years. After Jesse was found guilty of murder in this high-profile trial, he faced 2 more trials. These proceedings took place the following year and were conducted without a jury. The trials were scheduled after 2 women reported to the police. One of them spoke in detail about physical, sexual, emotional, and financial abuse at the hands of Jesse. She told the court how he held a knife to her throat, tried to strangle her, and forced her to have sex with him. At the same time, he was extorting money from her. In this case, Jesse was sentenced to 7 years and 6 months in prison. Another charge was brought against Jesse based on the testimony of a young British tourist. The woman claimed that Jesse had raped her 8 months before Grace's murder and had threatened to kill her family if she spoke out. For this, Jesse was sentenced to an additional 3.5 years in prison. He is now serving a life sentence. On August 15, 2009, in the small town of Bueno Park, California, in the early hours of the morning, a homeless man who was collecting metal cans thrown into garbage cans noticed the half-open suitcase in one of the garbage containers from which a human body was visible, which at first glance resembled the body of a child. The horrified man immediately called the police and reported the gruesome discovery. Law enforcement officers who arrived at the scene soon determined that the body in the suitcase did not belong to a child. The bag contained the completely naked body of a young, petite woman. Due to the severe injuries to her body and face, it was impossible to identify her. Upon further examination, investigators noticed that the woman had cut her fingers and knocked out her teeth. Law enforcement officers wondered who could have committed such brutality and why. One of the versions they considered was the involvement of a drug cartel, since Southern California is only a few kilometers from the Mexican border, and the cartel could have used local gangs to carry out this terrible crime. There was also suspicion that the murdered woman might have been an informant or that the case involved a serial killer. The body was transported to the Orange County Coroner's Office for examination. Signs of violence were immediately evident, but identifying the victim proved difficult. With her fingers missing, collecting fingerprints was impossible, and her face had been so badly disfigured from the beating that visual identification was also out of the question. Investigators enlisted forensic artists to create a possible sketch of the woman's face and release the image to the media, hoping someone might recognize her. It was immediately clear that the killer had gone to great lengths to ensure the victim could not be identified. However, during the autopsy, investigators discovered one crucial detail. The woman had silicone breast implants, each of which bears a unique serial number. It was through this number that the victim's identity was confirmed. The deceased was a 28-year-old Playboy model, Jasmine Fiore. Jasmine Fiore was born and raised in Bonnie Doon, a small town near Santa Cruz, California. She was an only child. When Jasmine was 9, her father left the family, and she was raised solely by her mother, who struggled constantly with financial difficulties. From childhood, Jasmine was energetic and adventurous. She often participated in various extreme activities, including racing car expeditions and riding horses with professional cowboys. She was a purposeful, cheerful, and full-of-life young woman whose plans already went beyond the boundaries of her hometown. In 2006, Jasmine left Bonnie Doon and tried to start her modeling career in Las Vegas and Los Angeles. She was often told that thanks to her looks, she had a strong chance of becoming a Playboy model. Like many other young women, she believed that attending parties and promotional events could be the way to success on the big stage, and possibly even lead to her photo appearing on the cover of Playboy magazine. Hugh Hefner, the publisher of Playboy, especially favored girls with Jasmine's type of appearance, and often gave them a chance to appear on the magazine's cover. Although Jasmine was aware that amid fierce competition, only 12 girls' photos were featured on the cover each year, she still submitted her portfolio. Although her photo did not make it to the front page of the magazine, it was not a failure for her. She was offered the position of the brand's representative. Jasmine had everything that was needed for this position: beauty, charm, and self-confidence. At that time, Playboy was not just a magazine. It was a lifestyle, and one of its branches was the Playboy golf tournaments, which were accompanied by grand parties and the elite environment of the brand. For these events, Playboy hired hundreds of girls, known as Playboy Golf Girls. Jasmine became one of them. In 2004, more than 35 such events were held across the country. Hundreds of girls participated in them, all with distinctive looks. At the events, there were tents where girls would hand out their photos, DJs would play, contests would be held, and everyone would have a great time. Jasmine was a Playboy golf girl for over a year, after which she was offered the opportunity to work as a coordinator for events planned in Los Angeles and Las Vegas, a role she gladly accepted. Working with Playboy was the perfect opportunity for her to start a better life. Soon, everything in her life changed dramatically. New acquaintances appeared, career opportunities arose, and parties followed. She was invited to the most prestigious venues and elite clubs where standing in line was considered an honor for others hoping to get in. After law enforcement identified the body found in the suitcase, investigators immediately checked the database to see if she had been reported missing. It was soon revealed that a missing person report for the girl had been filed on the very same day her body was discovered. It was revealed that the missing person report had been filed by Jasmine's husband, Ryan Jenkins. He claimed that Jasmine disappeared on August 14th, one day before her body was found. Once investigators confirmed that the report was made by her husband himself, detectives attempted to contact him. However, Ryan was not answering his phone. According to one of the investigation's standard procedures, in cases like this, the spouse is always considered the prime suspect. This does not mean they are necessarily guilty, but at the early stages of the investigation, questioning the spouse is essential to either confirm or rule out their involvement. One of the detectives from the Los Angeles Police Department eventually managed to contact Ryan Jenkins. Jenkins stated that he had indeed filed the missing person report for his wife, but now had to urgently return to Canada due to visa issues. Detective Ryan's answer seemed very suspicious. It was incomprehensible how his wife could disappear, and at that time her husband would rush abroad to solve a visa problem. After that, investigators began to study Jenkins' past and soon discovered that he had recently been a participant in one of the reality shows. The reality show was called Megan Wants a Millionaire. The main character, Hugh Hefner's former model Megan Hauserman, was presented as a single woman looking for the perfect man. Her main criteria were a financially strong, effective, and impressive man. The show featured 17 men, each of whom, according to the rules, had to have at least $1 million in assets. Candidates were selected based on financial capabilities and appearance. That's how Ryan Jenkins got on the show. Ryan Jenkins lived in Calgary, a city in the province of Alberta, Canada. Since childhood, he had dreamed of just one thing: becoming rich and famous. According to Megan Hauserman, as soon as the show started, at their first meeting, Ryan made a positive impression on her, and she liked him. Ryan wasn't shy about expressing his feelings. He wrote Megan love letters and told her he couldn't imagine life without her. Soon, Megan also developed feelings for Ryan, although they kept their relationship in secret during the show. According to the rules of the show, the male contestant had to have at least $1 million. Ryan told the casting director that he was worth $2.5 million, although it was later revealed that he was lying. Ryan's father had a construction company in Canada and was a millionaire, but Ryan himself had no assets. Megan found out about the lie, but she still liked Ryan. When only 3 contestants remained on the show, Megan told the producer that she wanted to choose Ryan as the winner. However, the producer informed her that a different finale had already been planned for the show. That was the first time Megan realized she wasn't the one making the decisions. She was also not allowed to share this information with Ryan, as doing so would have violated the show's rules. In the end, when one of the final 3 contestants had to be eliminated, she was told through her earpiece that it had to be Ryan. Following the show's protocol, Megan was forced to eliminate him herself. In reality shows, the contestants' feelings are often the last thing taken into account. What truly matters in these productions is the drama, a storyline so gripping that viewers can't take their eyes off the screen. The contestants are merely pieces in that script, doing whatever the producers tell them to. After Ryan was eliminated from the show, he returned to his hotel and kept trying to reach Megan by phone. At the time, Megan was preparing to fly to Mexico to film the final episode. Surrounded by producers, she wasn't able to answer Ryan's calls. Megan thought she would call him later, explain everything, and that their relationship would continue. But 2 days later, when they finally spoke, Ryan unexpectedly told her that he had found the love of his life, and they were already married. Megan was shocked. Just a few days earlier, Ryan had sworn his love to her and promised to marry her, but now he was telling her he was already married. Ryan explained that he had met a new girl at a nightclub in Las Vegas. Her name was Jasmine Fiore. Ryan was attracted to her and asked for her phone number. When Jasmine gave him her number, he wrote down her date of birth, and it turned out that they both had the same birthday. Ryan took this as a sign. He believed that Jasmine was his destiny. He convinced her of the same, and just 2 days after meeting, the couple got married in Las Vegas. Soon after their marriage, Jasmine realized that she had made a serious mistake. Her husband was not the man she had envisioned a future with. Ryan had no financial resources, but he assured Jasmine that it was just a matter of time. He claimed that the transfer of funds from Canada was being delayed by certain bureaucratic procedures, and that everything would soon be resolved. In reality, Ryan was simply living off her. Only a few weeks after the wedding, Ryan sent Megan a message. In the message, he admitted that after being eliminated from the reality show, he felt lost. He was confused and, in that state, made the wrong decision by marrying a woman he barely knew. Now he realized it was a mistake. He claimed that Jasmine was not the woman he had envisioned a life with. He begged Megan to meet him so he could explain everything in person. He insisted that true love was still between them and asked her to come back to him. Ryan was not the only suspect in the investigation. The detectives tried to find and question everyone who had contact with Jasmine during her final days, shortly before her brutal murder. A new and significant detail soon emerged in the case. DNA traces were found on Jasmine's body. Further laboratory analyses confirmed unequivocally that the sample contained human biological material. The investigation checked the DNA against the national database and quickly found a match. The DNA belonged to Michael Cardozo, a man who had recently been released from prison on parole. Law enforcement officers also discovered that Cardozo was Jasmine's ex-husband. Another detail soon emerged. The woman and Michael had last seen each other just 4 days earlier, on August 11, 2009. Jasmine had come to San Diego to personally congratulate her ex-husband on his release from prison. This fact further strengthened the investigators' suspicions, and Michael Cardozo became the main suspect in the investigation. However, during questioning, Cardozo presented evidence that completely dispelled all suspicions against him. He was wearing an electronic ankle bracelet, a monitoring device that precisely tracked his movements. The records clearly showed that during the time of the murder, Michael was not anywhere near the area where Jasmine's body was found. This provided a sufficient alibi, and ultimately, law enforcement removed his name from the list of suspects. Suspicions that the main figure in the murder of Jasmine Fiore was her husband, Ryan Jenkins, were growing stronger every day. It became increasingly clear to investigators that Ryan was trying to escape by running away. That is why they decided to study his past in detail. They soon discovered that Ryan had a criminal past. It turned out that years earlier, he had been arrested for assaulting a former girlfriend. The court sentenced him to 15 months of probation and also mandated compulsory treatment for violent sexual behavior. This information was already a serious warning sign for the investigation. A man who had previously been convicted by the court for assaulting a woman was now a suspect in the brutal murder of his wife. Law enforcement also determined that just 1 month after their marriage, Ryan Jenkins had a serious conflict with Jasmine in Las Vegas. The argument began when Ryan noticed Jasmine talking to another man. He became very angry and, during the quarrel, struck Jasmine, causing her to fall into a swimming pool. As a result of the incident, Jenkins was arrested on charges of domestic violence and spent the night in a detention center. The case was still under review at the time, 4 months later, when Jasmine Fiore was found brutally murdered. While investigators were gathering information about Ryan Jenkins, the news of Jasmine Fiore's murder spread like wildfire across all major news outlets and websites. The media extensively covered the details of this brutal killing. The tragedy occurred at a time when tabloids were eagerly seeking sensational and shocking stories. When it became known that Jasmine was a Playboy model, people frantically searched the internet for her nude photos. At that time, her name became one of the most searched keywords on search engines. Complete chaos ensued, as the public was more interested in the woman's nude images than in her tragic death. Law enforcement officers requested and soon received access to Jasmine and Ryan's cell phones, which allowed them to examine photos, video files, and text messages that were very important for the investigation. It turned out that the day before the tragedy, they were together in San Diego at a poker tournament. Investigators traveled to San Diego to find out the details of the tournament and check the hotel where they stayed. The building was equipped with surveillance cameras. The video footage showed that on August 13th at 15:28, they arrived at the hotel in Jasmine's Mercedes. The clips clearly show them getting out of the car and loading their luggage onto a special cart. Among the bags was the suitcase in which Jasmine's body was later found. The video footage shows them going up to their rented hotel room. Their next appearance is recorded at 18:25. This time they are seen leaving the room looking tense, heading toward the poker tournament. Investigators determined that during the poker tournament, Jasmine sent a text message. They also identified the recipient. It was Robert Hasman, a former boyfriend of Jasmine's, who was a successful real estate agent in Las Vegas. In the message, Jasmine asked Robert Hasman to send her a private plane to take her away. She wanted to escape from Ryan Jenkins and return to Las Vegas. According to eyewitness accounts, during the poker tournament, Jasmine and Ryan argued so strenuously that they had to leave the tournament. Later that night, they went to a nightclub called Ivy, where they arrived at around 12:30 a.m. According to eyewitnesses, they were arguing angrily about something. Law enforcement officials suspected that the cause of their conflict was likely that Jenkins had found out about the messages Jasmine had sent to Robert Hasman. According to Hasman, Jasmine's last message contained only a single word, "Bite me," which was completely out of context, considering the nature of the previous messages she had sent him. Investigators suspected that this final message might have been sent by Ryan Jenkins. According to eyewitnesses, the couple left the nightclub at 1:30 a.m. and returned to the location of the poker tournament to pick up Jasmine's car. They left the casino at 2:30 a.m., after which no one saw Jasmine again. At 4:30 a.m., surveillance footage from the hotel shows Ryan Jenkins entering his hotel room alone. He appears visibly panicked and in a hurry. However, there was a roughly 2-hour gap in the timeline, from the moment they picked up the car to the moment Jenkins returned to the hotel. That remained unaccounted for. Law enforcement officers assumed that Ryan saw the messages that Jasmine sent to Robert Hasman, which is why he beat her in the car. He did not want Jasmine to be caught on camera, so he went into the hotel room alone. The room had a terrace which allowed him to park his car right next to it. Investigators believed that Ryan probably led the beaten woman into the room from the terrace to avoid the cameras. According to witnesses living in the room opposite, at dawn, they heard a fight coming from Ryan and Jasmine's room. According to law enforcement, after the beating, Ryan tried to convince Jasmine not to tell anyone about the incident, but when he failed to do so, he strangled the woman. The search of the room was unsuccessful because it had already been cleaned and tidied by the hotel staff. However, on the terrace, investigators found strands of hair and bloodstains. Laboratory analysis confirmed that they belonged to Jasmine. Based on this evidence, law enforcement officials no longer had any doubt that that night, driven by jealousy, Ryan brutally killed Jasmine in the hotel room. And to prevent anyone from recognizing the body, he disfigured the face, cut off the fingers, and knocked out the teeth. He then packed the victim's body into a suitcase, dragged it from the veranda, and placed it into the car. In the morning, at 6:24 a.m., surveillance footage shows Ryan Jenkins leaving the hotel. He is holding what appears to be his clothes. According to police records, he drove onto the highway and was looking for a place to dispose of the victim's body. He spotted a garbage container in a nearby suburb and threw Jasmine's body, packed in a travel suitcase, inside.
Based on this information, an arrest warrant was issued for Ryan Jenkins, charging him with the brutal murder of Jasmine Fiore. Information about the search for him quickly spread across the media and the internet. His photo was published everywhere. He was described as a brutal killer. Due to his popularity, it was clear that he wouldn't be able to hide from law enforcement for long. Very soon, law enforcement received a report that Ryan Jenkins had been spotted in Las Vegas. He took a boat out of its dock, tied it to a car, and headed north toward the state of Washington. The police alerted Border Patrol agents that Jenkins might attempt to flee to Canada. They also provided the relevant information to the Canadian Border Police. Shortly afterward, reports emerged that the U.S. Coast Guard spotted a high-speed boat near the Canadian border, which was being operated by Ryan Jenkins. However, due to the darkness of night, they soon lost sight of the boat and were unable to apprehend him. It was later revealed that Jenkins arrived at a small harbor located a few kilometers from the Canadian border. He left the boat there and continued on foot. He crossed the border at an unguarded location where no official checkpoint was in operation. Jenkins took advantage of this exact spot. After moving to Canada, he was visited by his sister, who took him to the small town of Hope, where Jenkins rented a room hotel. There is an assumption that he was deeply troubled by his crime. However, what he suffered most was that after he committed the terrible murder, everything was over for him. Jenkins was especially afraid of life imprisonment. It was in that extreme emotional state, which is called despair, that he made the final decision. On August 19th, in a hotel room, Ryan Jenkins hanged himself. When the police found his body, they also discovered a note written by Ryan before his death. "I'm sure you all think that I am a monster, but I want to tell you, Jasmine was a much bigger monster than I. I just wanted to find love. I loved him with all my heart, and with a pure, strong feeling. I became a better person with him. I apologize for escaping responsibility. I no longer have a place in this world, because Jasmine was the key to my happiness."
In the spring of 2002, a train carriage caught fire at Tokyo Station due to faulty electrical wiring. Panicked passengers abandoned the burning carriages, leaving their luggage behind. When the rescuers put out the fire and began collecting the luggage left behind by the passengers, the contents found in one of the bags shocked everyone. The body of a teenage girl was found in a bag. She was alive but severely mutilated. All her limbs had been amputated, and her body was wrapped in a plastic bag with small holes cut into it for breathing. The girl could not speak because her vocal cords had been severed. It was strange, but there were no other signs of violence on the body apart from the amputated limbs. From a medical point of view, the girl's life was not in danger. On the outside of the plastic bag wrapping the body, the number 72 was written with a marker. Next to the mutilated body in the bag, there was a notebook containing the girl's medical records, details like allergies, menstrual cycle, blood type, and so on. The law enforcement officers used every effort to get any information from the girl who could have committed such cruelty, but since she couldn't speak or write, this didn't yield any results. However, after a long rehabilitation, a few years later, the girl was able to share information about who she was and what had happened to her. The case was reopened. The girl's name was Kikumi Totoro. She disappeared in 1999 after leaving school. Her parents believed their daughter was dead because neither they nor the police could find any trace of her. Law enforcement discovered that on the day the girl disappeared, an unknown man approached her and said that her parents had asked him to pick Kikumi up from school. The girl trusted him and got into the stranger's car. Once they were alone, the stranger poured an unknown liquid onto her face, causing her to lose consciousness. The kidnapped girl regained consciousness in a brightly lit large room. In the center of the room was an operating table on which the girl was lying, missing one leg. Next to her stood a man dressed in a surgeon's outfit, holding an electric saw, preparing to amputate her other leg. It seemed that her other leg had been amputated earlier, and judging by the fresh bandages, one of her hands had also been amputated not too long ago. The man turned on the electric saw and began cutting off the other leg. Kikumi heard how the saw cut through the flesh. As a result, the process slowed down slightly due to the resistance of the bones. Kikumi couldn't bear the shock and lost consciousness again. When she came to, she was in a completely different room tied to a bed. Out of fear and panic, she tried to scream, but it was useless. She attempted to free herself only to realize that she couldn't feel one of her arms. Her arm was wrapped in bandages. She realized that just like the girl she had seen in the other room, her hand had also been amputated. There were other girls in the room as well, all tied to beds. Each of them was missing limbs. Some had 2 amputated, others 3. None of them made a sound. Some were silently crying, while others weakly struggled to free themselves. Later, food was brought for everyone. Kikumi's unbound hand was freed so she could eat by herself, but she threw the food onto the floor. Shortly after the lights were turned off, a sign, it seemed, that the day had come to an end. The girl lay in soul-crushing silence, her breath catching from fear, but there was nothing she could do. During the first few nights, she was completely unable to sleep. Every day she was injected with drugs, after which Kikumi lost all sense of time. Her only reference point for the passage of time was the food, which was brought to her 3 times a day. She had no idea who her captor was or why he was torturing her in such a sadistic way. From time to time, the girls were taken out of the room and returned with 1 limb less. When the girls had only 1 limb left, they were taken to the last operation. After that, they never returned. No one knew what happened to them after that. It was unclear how many days, weeks, or months passed until Kikumi's both arms and legs were amputated. The time came when she was transferred to another location referred to as the exhibition hall. It was a circular room with elevated platforms along the walls. On each platform lay girls with amputated limbs. In the center stood an operating table, next to it a set of surgical instruments. It was at that moment that Kikumi saw her tormentor for the first time, an elderly man with a white beard. At first glance, he looked like an ordinary old man. His face was lined with wrinkles, and his eyes were filled with what appeared to be kindness and compassion. The old man approached Kikumi and removed the chains that bound her to the bed. She immediately tried with all the strength she had left to bite her tormentor, but it seemed he was prepared for this. Calmly and without hesitation, he restrained her and secured her back onto the bed. As punishment for her behavior, the old man attached a metal plate to Kikumi's back using a special harness. Then he brought over a device shaped like a flat panel or board. Using the mechanism attached to her chest, he fixed her securely onto the board, then lifted her into the air and hung her on the wall like an object. Once his work was done, the old man turned off the lights and quietly left the room. Every minute spent in that position was worse than hell for the girl. The unbearable torment eventually caused her to lose consciousness. When she opened her eyes again, she noticed something had changed. Every girl in the room now had makeup carefully applied to her face, and they were arranged according to age. All of them were Japanese, with dark hair and pale skin. Then a man entered the room carrying a bottle filled with an unknown liquid. He made all the girls drink from it. Afterwards, the elderly torturer examined the condition of each girl's body carefully. After this procedure, Kakumi realized that she was just one of the horrifying exhibits in this dreadful collection. From time to time, someone would come, select 3 girls, wrap them in plastic, put them in a bag, and take them somewhere. When it was Kakumi's turn, she too was wrapped in plastic, labeled with the number 72, and placed in a bag. Inside the bag, the terrified girl could hear the sounds of the street and passing cars. Then she heard the sound of train brakes and people screaming. Within a few hours, she was found by rescuers and the police. A few years after this ordeal, when the girl provided the police with some information, they managed to arrest her kidnapper. However, the arrested old man died under very mysterious circumstances, and the police were unable to obtain any further information from him. They also never discovered the terrible place where the kidnapped girls had been held captive. On the morning of May 27, 1997, in the city of Kobe, Japan, a school janitor noticed suspicious black objects scattered on the way to school. The objects were scattered far from the main entrance of the school. When the janitor approached, he saw that they were mutilated animal bodies wrapped in cellophane bags. Frightened and disturbed by what he had seen, the school janitor continued on his way. As he approached the main entrance of the school, he noticed another bag. With trembling hands, he opened the plastic and looked inside to see what was there. He realized that it was nothing, just the mutilated body of an animal. In a cellophane bag lay the severed head of a teenage boy, his eyes gouged out, and the Latin letter X carved into his face. The corpse had a crumpled piece of paper stuffed in its mouth. It was a mocking letter written in red ink with the following message: "This is the beginning of the game. Police, stop me if you can." At the end of the letter was the criminal's pseudonym, Sakakibara Seito, written using kanji characters that mean Devil's Holy Rose. The residents of Kobe were still recovering from the shock of the devastating earthquake that had claimed many lives when a new wave of terror struck. An unknown madman attacked 2 local schoolgirls as they were walking home from school, striking them on the back of the head with a hammer. The criminal managed to escape before anyone could see him. Fortunately, despite severe head injuries, both girls recovered fully. However, as it turned out, this was not the only incident. On March 16th, there were more attacks on teenagers, this time on 10-year-old Ayaki Yamashita and 9-year-old Kazumi Shika. Ayaki was hit in the head from behind with a hammer, while Kazumi, who was attacked just 10 minutes later, was stabbed in the stomach. Ayaki suffered brain damage and died a week after the attack. The second victim, Kazumi, miraculously survived. The wound was just a few millimeters away from the main artery in his spine. Unlike other victims, Kazumi was able to see the attacker's face and provided information about it to the investigation. Investigators suspected that the same person did all 4 attacks. The attacker left his calling card at each scene, mutilated corpses of birds and animals. In one place, a headless pigeon was found, and in another, a killed and dismembered squirrel. 2 months had passed since the last attack by the unknown maniac, yet law enforcement still had not apprehended a suspect. Even though the maniac was still free, the children's parents and teachers were relatively calm, believing that the maniac had gotten tired of it all or had realized what a terrible thing he was getting into and had stopped it all. But their sense of calm proved to be short-lived. On May 24th, a local 11-year-old boy, Jun Hase, went missing. The people of Kobe were gripped by fear. Everyone thought that the reason for the child's disappearance was the same maniac. 3 days after Jun Hase's disappearance, a school janitor found Jun Hase's severed head wrapped in cellophane near the school's main entrance. The boy's headless body was found west of the school on a hill known as Water Reservoir Mountain. The investigation determined that the boy's head had been cut off with a handmade saw and then mutilated with the same tool. There were no eyewitnesses to this gruesome murder. However, newspapers and television channels suggested that the perpetrator was probably a 30 to 40-year-old man with firm physical characteristics. A week and a half after Jun's murder, a brown envelope arrived at the editorial office of one of the largest city newspapers, Kobe Shimbun. It had no return address and contained a 3-page letter written by the maniac claiming that he was the crown of the case. The letter read, "I am risking my life for this game. If I am caught, I will most likely be hanged. The police should be more eager to catch me. When I commit murder, only then will I be free from constant hatred and find peace and be cured of other pains." The maniac wrote that he would attack schools out of hatred for the Japanese education system, which he said had made him oppressed, isolated, and lonely. The letter was again written under the name Sakakibara Seito. Widespread panic and confusion swept through the Japanese media, which mistakenly published the maniac's name as Onibara Demon's Rose. This mistake cost the journalists dearly, as they soon received a new letter from the maniac. The maniac wrote in the threatening letter, "If you spell my name wrong again and ruin my mood, I will destroy 3 vegetables a week. If you think I only have eyes for children, you are very mistaken." By vegetable, he meant any member of society. That is, he said he would kill 3 random people a week if someone spelled his name wrong. As a result of the investigative actions carried out, and with the help of the testimony of the surviving victim, Kazumi, the investigators focused their attention on a young man who had previously been noticed for torturing and killing animals. They had sufficient evidence to accuse him, and on June 28th, 1 month after Juni's body was found near the school gate, the suspect was arrested. When it became known that the arrested person was a 14-year-old boy, the public was shocked and couldn't believe that such a young teenager could be a maniacal killer. Due to Japan's strict privacy laws, the suspect's name remained unknown for decades, and he was simply referred to in the media as the boy. However, very recently, his real name was revealed, Shinichiro Azuma. Azuma told police that he and Jun Hase went to the same school where the boy's head was found. Azuma told police how Jun had lured him to a mountain on May 24th. He said he would show him a giant turtle that lived near a water tank. After climbing the mountain, Azuma strangled Jun and then hid his body under the floor of a nearby hut. The next day, he returned with a homemade saw and a black garbage bag. He cut off Jun's head and drank her blood. He claimed that this ritual had cleansed his sinful soul. Then he gouged out the child's eyes, removed the head, and left it at the school's main entrance. When asked why he took the head to the school entrance, he answered that there were 2 reasons. One was that no one would suspect him if he left the head at his own school's entrance, and the second was that it was an act of revenge against the school that had made him such a failure and warped his soul. During the interrogation, Azuma not only confessed to Jun's murder, but also stated that he was the one who attacked 4 school students earlier that same year, including Ayaki Yamashi, who died from the injuries sustained. Azuma wrote about Ayaki in his diary, "Today I conducted a sacred experiment to prove how fragile a person is. I raised a hammer, and when the girl turned towards me, I struck her several times on the head." When Ayaki died on March 2nd from the injuries sustained, Azuma wrote again in his diary, "This morning, the handwriting in the diary exactly matched the handwriting of the letters sent to the editorial office. As a result, Shinichiro Azuma was found guilty of the murders of Ayaki and Jun Hase. He was sentenced to imprisonment and placed in a juvenile correctional facility. His lawyers tried tried to prove that he was being accused of a crime he did not commit. Japan has a high conviction rate of 99.8% and is often criticized for arresting innocent people based on their coerced confessions. Azuma's lawyers argued that the perpetrator was left-handed, while Azuma was right-handed, and that the person who wrote the letters to the media used a lot of complex speech forms and complex hieroglyphs, indicating that he was an intellectually highly developed person. According to them, Azuma, who was at best an average student, was not intelligent enough to write such letters. Furthermore, regarding the confession he had written with his own hand, Azuma claimed that he confessed to acts that were impossible for a 14-year-old to commit. Azuma's lawyers' statements compelled Azuma's mother to visit him in prison and ask him face-to-face whether he was truly guilty of the crimes he was convicted of, to which Azuma calmly replied, yes, it was so. On March 11, 2004, less than 7 years after his imprisonment, 20-year-old Azuma was released from prison. After his release, he published a book titled Zeke's Memories of the 97-Year Murders. Despite public outrage over his attempt to profit from his horrific crimes and the suffering of the victims' families, this did not prevent the book from becoming a #1 bestseller in Japan, and Azuma became wealthy. After all this, Azuma sent letters of apology to the families of his victims and books with Sakita's signature. Azuma became one of the richest people in Japan thanks to his memoirs. The public was outraged and called on the Japanese authorities to ban the publication of such books. Psychologists suggested that Azuma was a narcissistic psychopath. This incident led the Japanese government to lower the age of criminal responsibility from 16 to 14. The most terrible thing about this story is that neither the parents nor Japanese society was able to prevent this tragedy, even though it could have been prevented.